Hello, I'm Simon. Welcome back to the workshop. Now today I'm going to be building a small thin-walled box for a pack of Uno cards. Now I'm sure you know that if you build anything small, any little inaccuracies will really show up. So in this project I'm going to need to be really precise. Let's get tinkering. To make this thin-walled wooden box I need some thin stock and I don't have any, so I'm going to dimension it on the table saw. Now the table saw isn't actually big enough to go through the wood all in one piece, so I'm going to have to do it in two passes by flipping it upside down after the first pass. Now that means that I can't use the crown guard or the riving knife, both of which protrude above the saw blade. These are obviously safety features, but these cuts can't be done with those safety features in place, so they have to be removed. Just as a precaution as well, I'm also going to remove the throat plate and put in my zero clearance throat plate. Here you can also see where the front of table support that I built makes a massive difference to the support that I can provide for this piece of wood going through the saw. So I cut two of these boards. They're 5.3mm thick, roughly. They vary a little, they're not perfectly the same all the way along, but they'll do. It's slightly rough finish and there's a few little burn marks and things, but I can sand all that out and I think it'll be fine. If I had a thicknesser, then I would obviously put them through a thicknesser, and I think that would make a big difference. So I'd give them a quick sand using my sanding station, starting at 80 grit and working down to 220. Then, deciding that was too much like hard work, I used the random orbital sander. So looking at this board edge on, I need to put a rebate in the top for the top of the lid. I need to put a rebate in the bottom for the base, and I need to add a rebate here and a rebate here. I'll then separate these along this line here, and then this will slot into that piece. That's the strategy. These rebates are going to be done with this bit here, so the length of the board needs to be the total height of the cards plus the thickness twice of the board I'm using plus one diameter of this router bit. So I've worked that out to be 2¼ inches, I think it was. 2¼ inches. So I'm going to go back to the table saw and just cut this edge off. The reason I'm cutting this edge off rather than this edge is when I've looked at it, when I've sanded it, I've actually sanded this a bit too thin on this side. So I'm going to be removing the worst of my mistake with the sanding, so the thickness is hopefully even enough for it not to be a problem. So now I trim up the wood on the table saw. Go on, you know you want to. Click that subscribe button. I set the height of the router to half the thickness of the board. Now I'm doing this using my homemade DRO, which I have a video link in the description. For me the board is 4.2mm thick, so I need to set the DRO to 2.1mm. The width of the rebate is set to the thickness of the board. This is quite a thin board and I don't fancy getting my hands too close to the router bit, so I'm going to use my feather boards. I also have a link down below for a video how I made them. Okay, it's not as clean a cut as I would like. I've had some splitting of the board. I don't know if that's just because it's a very thin board or there's something wrong with my technique. or the router bit that I'm using, but I think I could probably tidy it up and it'd be okay. So I've cut this one and this one. I'm now going to cut this one here. Now to cut this groove, the sawdust doesn't have anywhere to go, so I've increased the size of the throat on the bit just to see if that helps, and I've fixed the hoover underneath to try and capture some of the dust. I'm not going to cut this last rebate just yet, but I'm just going to set it up first. So I need to move this board back the width of the blade so that the next rebate starts where this one finishes, but on the opposite side. Now, just so we can orient ourselves, the side with the dados and rebates is the inside of the box. I now need to set the blade on the table saw to 45 degrees. Because this is quite thin, I've added a little backing plate just to give the wood a little bit of support and make sure that it's held down properly. I've flipped the wood and I'm using my fence and the magnetic inclinometer as a stop. Then with the stop back in place, I can cut the second piece. I then carry on in the same manner, but cutting the shorter sides. I've clamped the box using elastic bands for a dry fit so that I can measure the recess for the top and bottom pieces. If you're still watching, why not click that thumbs up? Go on, you know you want to. A little bit of inattention there. I made a big mistake, which was using the fence as a stop, something you should never do because it can cause kickback. And you did see this fly back slightly. Obviously it's a very little thin piece of wood and it didn't cause me any problems, but you should never ever do that. I'm now just sanding the lid and the base before I put them on the box. Now it's time for a dry fit. It's now time to glue up. You can see there are a few splinters and things that I need to deal with, but I'll sort them out later. I have a few little gaps, so I'm just going to fill those with sawdust before I move on. And now I can sand the top and bottom flush. Now it's important with all this sanding that we keep track of the top and the bottom, because we can't see this rebate on the inside, and we set this up to do this rebate here. We don't want to do it down here, we want to do it at the top here. So I've kept track of where the top is, so I should now be able to take this rebate here. I've lowered this just a small amount, 0.1 of a millimetre. I'm hoping that's enough to hold the box together, and I can then slice it with my knife for the final little bit here. If not, it'll all come apart and it'll all be a disaster. But then that's the fun of woodworking. Now, paying close attention to my diagram, I can see that I need to cut at the top of this piece. So I should be able to now slice through the box. Now, if I've cut everything in the right places, oops, it should slowly come apart. I'm taking it easy, it's almost gone through. It's definitely through there. Don't want to force it. It's so close to being all the way through. Got one little splinter that I just need to glue back on. And here's the finished box. I now give it a rub down with the tack cloths before applying some Danish oil. Well, this turned out pretty well in the end. I think if I was doing it again, I would get a little bit better at the techniques, and a sharper blade on my table saw I'm sure would make a massive difference as well. But I'm very pleased with how it came out. I think next time I'll try making one out of a bit of hardwood. But overall, I'm very pleased with it. It's worked really well. It's pretty sturdy. It fits nicely, and I'm just very happy with it. It feels very nice to hold as well, which is another bonus, I guess. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. And if you haven't already, then please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.